moment the man responsible for abducting a young woman and subjecting her to unimaginable horrors was sentenced to 60 years in prison, a wave of relief washed over the community. They believed that he was finally off the streets, no longer posing a threat to anyone. Little did they suspect that this was merely the beginning, as the sinister secrets of his atrocious acts were yet to be unveiled. The 60-year sentence turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg as shocking revelations continued to emerge, unraveling a twisted tale that took years to fully comprehend. Who was this man, and what were the deeply concealed secrets he held? Texas, the second largest state in the United States, is renowned for its diverse landscape, rich history, and vibrant culture. From the iconic deserts of West Texas to the bustling urban centers like Houston and Dallas, the state offers a plethora of attractions. However, Texas has also witnessed its fair share of notorious crimes. For years, Interstate 45 in Texas has been a haunting place, instilling fear in the hearts of many. The highway that stretches between Galveston and Houston is notorious for its connection to numerous unsolved murders throughout the years. Deputy Chief Josh Rogers from Texas has stated that 1997 was an especially deadly year, with a high number of incidents occurring along this route. However, the question remains, what truly happened here? To delve into this matter, let us begin with the case involving Laura Smitha. On April 3, 1997, at approximately 9:00 a.m., 12-year-old Laura Smitha asked her mother for permission to go for a jog alone. Little did her mother know that granting this request would lead to enduring pain. Laura, who was raised in the city of Friendswood, Texas, by her parents Bob and Gay Snither, had a happy childhood alongside her younger brother David. She was known for her kindness and gentle nature. Laura excelled academically and possessed a remarkable talent for ballet. Her dream of becoming a ballerina was on the verge of becoming a reality, as she had recently been accepted into the prestigious Houston Ballet Academy. While preparing breakfast, Laura's mother agreed to her request, understanding that Laura had been diligently working on her cardio to enhance her ballet skills. However, as time passed and Laura failed to return, the parents grew increasingly anxious. Laura had never been away for such an extended period, and as she was always under their watchful eye due to being homeschooled, they sensed that something was amiss. Laura's father scoured the neighborhood in search of her, but there was no sign of his daughter. Growing more concerned, they reached out to relatives and friends, hoping for any information regarding Laura's whereabouts, but their efforts yielded no answers. With Laura still missing, they made the difficult decision to contact the Friendswood police and report her as a missing person. As the police initiated their investigation, the community rallied around Laura's family, joining forces to aid in the search. Flyers with Laura's photograph were distributed and residents in the area were questioned in the hopes of uncovering any leads. The outpouring of support and love from the community deeply touched Laura's parents, as they witnessed firsthand the genuine care and concern for their beloved daughter. The following morning, law enforcement officers were actively searching for the missing little girl. Some officers conducted thorough searches on foot through the nearby woods, while helicopters were deployed to search from above. Unfortunately, no significant leads were found. However, despite this setback, the community remained resilient and supportive. Hundreds of volunteers joined forces with Laura's family to assist in the search for the 12-year-old. Over the course of a week, approximately 6,000 volunteers participated in the search campaign. Surprisingly, each passing day brought even more volunteers and improved tracking techniques, such as the utilization of infrared cameras to uncover potential clues. In a remarkable display of dedication, a search and rescue team, along with their specially trained dogs, traveled all the way from Dallas to offer their assistance. These remarkable canines, with their exceptional sense of smell, spent an entire day meticulously sniffing around Laura's home, picking up scents from distances as far as 800 yards away. The local police were working tirelessly, and their efforts were further bolstered by the involvement of the National Coast Guard and FBI. Initially, the authorities believed that Laura may have become lost in the woods. However, as the investigation progressed, suspicions of foul play began to arise. In order to sustain the search efforts, the community organized candlelight rallies and vigils in honor of Laura. Despite these collective efforts, an entire week passed without any significant progress in Laura's case. On Sunday, April 20th, 1997, the community convened at Friendswood High School to discuss the next steps. During the meeting, the police chief received a phone call that visibly troubled him, causing concern among the attendees. However, they remained unaware of the details. Later that evening, around 10 p.m., Laura's parents were informed of a horrifying discovery. Earlier that same day, a father and son, while walking their dog, stumbled upon the badly decomposed body of a young girl in a muddy area near a pond in Pasadena, just 12 miles away from where Laura had disappeared. The girl was found wearing only a pair of socks, leading the police to suspect that it could be Laura. Subsequently, the autopsy confirmed their worst fears. 17 days after her disappearance, Laura was tragically found, marking a heartbreaking conclusion to the search efforts. Due to Laura's prolonged time in the water, investigators were unable to determine the exact cause of her death and were uncertain if she had been physically assaulted. The tragic loss of this young girl deeply saddened and shocked the entire Friendswood community. Alongside the grief, there was also a prevailing sense of fear as people worried that a dangerous individual might still be out there, potentially targeting more victims. In an urgent attempt to gather leads, the police began questioning sex offenders in the area. Despite numerous uncertainties, a suspect quickly emerged. This individual had been released from an Oklahoma prison just 6 months prior to Laura's murder, after serving a 10-year sentence for 2 physical assaults. At the time of Laura's disappearance, he was employed as an equipment operator in Windsor State, Friendswood. Strangely, he left work around the same time Laura went missing, and returned 30 minutes later. When investigators examined his truck, they discovered fibers from his replacement floor mats that matched those found on Laura's socks. Despite ongoing efforts to gather stronger evidence against him, the man remained free, frequently traveling between Houston, where he worked, and Oklahoma, where his mother resided. However, it didn't take long for another incident to occur. Just 2 months later, on July 15, 1997, in Denton, Texas, a university town along the same stretch of interstate, a 20-year-old woman named Kelly Cox vanished. Kelly would typically spend her mornings studying at the University of North Texas and the rest of her day caring for her daughter, Alexis. On that fateful day, Kelly prepared everything for her daughter, packed her bag with necessary items, and rushed out the door. She dropped off her 19-month-old daughter with a babysitter before heading to a field trip for her criminology class at a Denton jail, accompanied by her classmates. Kelly parked her car across from the police station and, as a precaution, hid a spare key in a magnetic box underneath her car. After securing her belongings, including her phone, in the car as advised by her professor, Kelly decided to explore the jail on a guided tour. Once the tour concluded around noon, she promptly left because she had an important test at the university. However, when she attempted to unlock her car door with the spare key, she encountered an unexpected problem. Despite having checked the key the previous night, it mysteriously failed to work. This left Kelly unable to access her cell phone, which was locked inside the car. In order to seek assistance, she walked to a nearby gas station and utilized a payphone to contact her boyfriend, Lawrence Harris. Kelly requested that he bring another key since the one she possessed had suddenly become infective. Following the call, she entered the gas station to quench her thirst. Approximately 45 minutes later, Lawrence arrived at the gas station only to find Kelly's car still parked in the lot, but Kelly herself was nowhere to be found. Furthermore, the key box and the spare key were also missing. Concerned for her well-being, Lawrence searched for Kelly and eventually contacted her mother to inquire if she had returned home. Unfortunately, Kelly had not. As time passed, Kelly's family grew increasingly worried. By 5:30 p.m. that afternoon, it became evident that something was amiss. Kelly was scheduled to pick up her 19-month-old daughter Alexis from the babysitter's house at that time, but she failed to appear. This raised significant alarm since Kelly was known for being a responsible mother despite her young age. It seemed highly unlikely that she would neglect to collect Alexis or make alternative arrangements if necessary. Consequently, a missing persons report was promptly filed, prompting investigators to initiate a search for the young mother. Their initial course of action involved interviewing individuals close to Kelly in order to gather relevant information. After successfully passing 4 polygraph tests, Lawrence was eliminated as a suspect. Surprisingly, it was a turn of events when investigators acted upon a tip that led them to a different individual, a man who had been a suspect in the Laura sniffer case. Despite not residing in Denton, the gas station received placed him at the location on the day Kelly disappeared. Due to his status as a sex offender, he became a prime suspect, prompting the police to search his vehicle for Kelly's fingerprints. Strangely, they found none, leaving them without any further evidence to link him to the disappearance. It remained a mystery as to how this man, despite being suspected, managed to elude capture each time. Who was he and what was his story? Unfortunately, without answers to these questions, the case eventually went cold with no leads, witnesses, or surveillance footage. For many years, Kelly's mother experienced profound sadness whenever a body was discovered along the notorious Texas highway. She clung to the hope that one day Kelly would return home, but sadly, that day never arrived. Kelly's disappearance took a toll on her mother and stepfather, particularly as they had to raise young Alexis on their own. However, the most challenging part was explaining to Alexis that her mother was unlikely to come back and provide her with warmth and maternal love. Despite the passing years, Kelly never reappeared for her daughter. Following in her mother's footsteps, Alexis attended the same university, holding on to the belief that her mother might one day return. Throughout all those years, Kelly's family never lost hope. They continued to share her story and tirelessly displayed her picture wherever they could. Unfortunately, even after numerous efforts, Kelly never found her way back home. However, the shocks were far from over, as just 11 days after Kelly went missing in Oklahoma, another young woman was on the verge of disappearing. On June 26, 1997, around midnight, a patrol officer from the Bethany Police Department noticed a white neon Dodge left at a car wash. Initially, it didn't raise any suspicions for the officer. However, upon returning later and finding the car still there, his suspicions grew. While approaching the vehicle, he observed that the key remained in the ignition and the car door was ajar. Swiftly, he transmitted the license plate number to headquarters and ascertained that the car belonged to Tiffany Johnston, a 17-year-old. Upon inspecting the interior, he discovered Tiffany's purse and stumbled upon a phone number belonging to her mother, Kathy, who resided in Antarctica, the considerable 60 miles away from Bethany. Consequently, the investigators promptly contacted Ryan, Tiffany's husband, who was equally unaware of his wife's whereabouts. It was becoming increasingly evident that something was amiss. Ryan disclosed to the officer that Tiffany had left her part-time job at a restaurant around 2 p.m. on that day, excited to celebrate their 3-month anniversary. However, she was only expected to meet him at 11 o'clock p.m. On her way home, Tiffany had made a stop at the Sunshine Car Wash to clean her white neon Dodge. Nevertheless, when Ryan went to meet her later that night, he discovered no trace of her and she was absent from their residence as well. Filled with concern and anxiety, he initially contemplated contacting the authorities but ultimately decided to wait a little longer, hoping that Tiffany would return on her own. However, even before the police could initiate a search for Tiffany, they received devastating news. Just a day after her disappearance, on July 27, 1997, near I-40 in Gregory Road, searchers looking for another missing girl fortuitously stumbled upon the lifeless body of a young Caucasian woman. Upon the arrival of the police, they already harbored suspicions that it could be Tiffany, and their fears were confirmed when Ryan identified her from the photographs. Tragically, she was discovered wearing only a swimsuit, with all her other garments removed. Although the exact time of her demise could not be determined during the autopsy, it revealed that she had been subjected to physical assault and strangulation. Additionally, unknown DNA was found on her body, which was collected and preserved as evidence. In such a scenario, anyone could potentially be a suspect and suspicion fell upon someone very close to Tiffany. However, it didn't take long to discover that Tiffany was last seen at the car wash at 6 o'clock p.m. During that time, Ryan was at work and he had been there from 3 o'clock p.m. to 11 o'clock p.m. analyzing the timeline. The police realized that it didn't make sense for Tiffany to have been abducted from the busy car wash. If someone had forcefully taken her, there would likely have been a significant struggle. However, the area where the car was found showed no signs of a struggle and even the car itself was unlocked. Nothing appeared disturbed in the vicinity. This led the police to consider the possibility that Tiffany willingly got into the car with someone she knew and left with them. While the investigation was ongoing, a few days later, Kathy, Tiffany's mother, received a phone call from a man named William Reese, who she knew from her town of Anadarko. Although they hadn't met in person, William's mother was good friends with Tiffany's mother. He called Kathy shortly after Tiffany's death to offer condolences, but little did she know about the hidden secrets. As time passed, the investigation made no progress and the case eventually ended up in the cold case files. With the ongoing murders of women in the area, the entire community began to question when this horrifying game would come to an end. Just 3 weeks after Tiffany's murder, another tragedy struck Lamar, Texas. Jessica Kane, born on August 28, 1979, brought immense joy to her parents, CH and Susie Kane. With a passion for sports, she held the position of drill team captain at O'Connell High School in Galveston, Texas. On August 16, 1997, after participating in a musical review in Dickinson and attending a cast party at Bennigan on Bay Area Boulevard. Jessica failed to return home after a night out with friends. When she couldn't be found at home the next morning, Jessica's mother panicked and urgently woke up her father. They immediately began trying to reach Jessica. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to locate her. So they reached out to several friends who had been with Jessica the night before. All of them had the same story. Jessica left the party around 1:30 a.m. and no one had heard from her since. Jessica's parents became increasingly worried, especially when her father discovered her car parked near the Lumans exit on the freeway. Her belongings were still inside, but Jessica was nowhere to be found. Filled with concern, he immediately contacted the police to report her as missing. Search parties were organized once again, with over 100 volunteers coming through the marshes and brush on foot. During this difficult time, Jessica's parents found comfort in connecting with Bob and Gay Smitha, the parents of Laura Smitha, who had also gone missing. Despite reliving their own nightmare, the Smithas stood strong in supporting Jessica's parents and actively participated in the search efforts. They shared the concern of whether the person responsible for Jessica's disappearance was the same individual who had taken their own daughter's life. Despite extensive searches conducted by law enforcement in the community, there were no signs of Jessica. The police began considering the possibility of foul play and expressed a grim belief that finding Jessica alive was unlikely. However, amidst the ongoing search, a new story emerged about another case where the victim had managed to survive. On May 16, 1997, 3 months prior to Jessica's disappearance, a 19-year-old mother named Sandra Sopor had a disturbing encounter. She had stopped at a convenience store in Webster, Texas, off I-45, and noticed a man staring at her in the parking lot. Later, at a Waffle House across the street, she saw the same man again. He followed her to the store and offered to help her with her flat tires. Suddenly, he pulled out a knife and forcefully took Sandra into this white pickup truck. Inside the truck, the man overpowered her, tied her wrists, and drove along Interstate 45. Sandra, overwhelmed by fear, made a shocking realization that the truck door was not locked. In a desperate bid for freedom, she mustered all her strength, broke free from the restraints, and leaped out of the moving truck. Unfortunately, her daring escape resulted in severe injuries, prompted by the urgency. She was swiftly transported to a nearby hospital where the authorities were promptly notified, and the incident was duly reported. In October 1997, 5 months later, a meeting with Friendswood police led Webster investigators to realize that Sandra's description of her abductor matched a truck they had previously searched in Laura's case. On October 16, 1997, during a lineup, Sandra quickly identified the man who had abducted her as William Reese. This raised the question of who he was and whether he was the same suspect from Laura's case in April 1997. William Lewis Reese, born on July 1, 1959 in Oklahoma and raised in Yukon in Anadarko, was one of 13 siblings. Due to his family's financial struggles, he had to drop out of school in the 9th grade and began working as a farm laborer. He had 2 short-lived marriages. In April 1986, William kidnapped a 19-year-old daughter of a Texas sheriff's deputy, resulting in his arrest and charges. However, he was released on bail. Just a month later, while still out on bond, he physically assaulted another woman, leading to another arrest. He faced trial for both crimes, was found guilty, and received a 25-year prison sentence. However, he appealed his conviction and a criminal court reviewed his case, identifying procedural errors that resulted in a reduction of his sentence. He was granted parole in October 1996, approximately 9.5 years into his sentence. This release occurred just 6 months before Laura's disappearance. After leaving prison, William moved into his mother's home in Anadarko, Oklahoma. Returning to the case, William was promptly arrested in October 1997 and charged with kidnapping Sarah Sapar. He pleaded not guilty and was incarcerated, but he was still not linked to the murders of the other girls. Despite his denial of kidnapping Sarah and slashing her tires, investigators remained determined to establish a connection between him and Laura's murder. Deputy Chief Josh Rogers made a significant discovery while searching William's apartment. Among the items found was a multicolored horse blanket, which matched the colors on one of Laura's socks. Despite finding fibers from Laura's socks on William's floor mats, the district attorney, DA, at the time did not believe it was enough evidence to charge him with Laura's murder. However, the determined Friendswood detectives continued their investigation. They delved into records to trace William's movements during the previous summer and uncovered potential connections to other unsolved cases. Their dedication to solving these mysteries was unwavering. The investigation took an intriguing turn when investigators found a fuel bill in Denton on the same date and location as Kelly Cox's disappearance. This was the first time Kelly's mother, Jan, had heard about William, and now Denton police had him on their radar as well. Further records revealed that William had used a payphone in the town, where Tiffany's body was discovered less than an hour after she went missing. Additionally, the owner of a car wash confirmed that William was a frequent customer upon seeing his picture. This new evidence made William the primary suspect in Tiffany's case too. The jury wasted no time in reaching a guilty verdict, and in 1998, William was convicted and sentenced to 60 years for kidnapping Sandra. Finally, after a year, the community felt a sense of relief knowing that William was behind bars. However, Laura's case, as well as Tiffany's, Kelly's, and Jessica's cases, officially remained unsolved. While residing in Oklahoma, Kathy, the mother of Tiffany, never ceased her efforts to urge investigators to solve her daughter's murder. It took over 10 years for Kathy's persistent calls to finally receive a response. In 2012, retired police chief Lynn Williams joined the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation's cold case team and took on the task of investigating Tiffany's case. Within the evidence box, Lynn discovered DNA evidence from Tiffany's body that had been meticulously preserved throughout the years. Despite 2 unsuccessful tests, Wendy Duke, the supervising criminologist at the OSBI cold case unit, uncovered 2 samples from Tiffany's body that had not been fully utilized in previous testing. Remarkably, she managed to develop a partial male profile from these samples. Duke meticulously compared the known profiles to find a match, and as the team eliminated suspects one by one, they made a shocking discovery. The perpetrator behind Tiffany's murder turned out to be none other than William Reese, an individual connected to Tiffany's family who had even expressed grief over her death. This revelation prompted the Oklahoma District Attorney to believe that there was enough evidence to charge William with Tiffany's murder. After enduring years of waiting, finally found some solace as justice appeared to be within reach. Oklahoma law enforcement shared crucial information with Texas investigators, including the Texas Rangers, who were eager to collaborate with William Reese in order to solve their cases. They made a visit to William in prison, and surprisingly, he agreed to further discussions on the condition that the death penalty would be taken off the table. In exchange for his cooperation in resolving the cases, authorities agreed to this condition. In February 2016, William Reese was transferred from prison to the Friendswood jail after agreeing to provide information regarding 3 Texas cases. Authorities also accompanied him to a remote field south of Friendswood where he claimed to have disposed of Kelly Cox's. The police dedicated extensive time to working with William, both in jail and out in the field, in their search for Kelly's remains. During this period, he began divulging details to investigators about his encounter with Kelly in Denton. According to William, they had a confrontation in a gas station parking lot after he accidentally bumped into her, causing her to spill her soda on him. During the interview, William confessed to killing Kelly, but there was another shocking revelation. He also disclosed to investigators what happened to Laura on that rainy morning in Friendswood. William claimed that Laura died instantly after he accidentally struck her with his truck. However, he later altered his story, stating that Laura actually survived. According to him, when he attempted to silence her cries, he accidentally broke her neck. Upon examining William's inconsistent statements and behavior, Mary Ellen O'Toole, a retired FBI profiler, suggested that he display traits of psychopathy. She believed that William derived pleasure from the attention he received from law enforcement and the disruption to his routine. During the ongoing search for remains, William continued to confess to each murder, providing specific details about Jessica and Tiffany's cases and disclosing the various locations where he buried their bodies. In March 2016, after 25 days of determined excavation guided by William, a breakthrough occurred. Jessica's remains were discovered at a site in a Houston pasture. However, her parents requested privacy to process the news and lay their daughter to rest. The discovery of Jessica's remains significantly bolstered the credibility of Williams, reigniting the search for Kelly with renewed determination. After 2 more weeks of painstaking effort, Kelly's remains were successfully located at a burial site in Brazoria County. This was an incredibly painful moment for the families who still clung to hope that their daughters might return alive. In July 2016, Reese was extradited from Texas to Oklahoma to stand trial for Johnston's murder. The trial commenced on April 21, 2017, but Reese's defense team filed a motion for a change of venue due to asbestos contamination in the courthouse. An independent examination confirmed the hazardous condition of the building, leading to an adjournment of the trial until June 2019. Meanwhile, Texas prosecutors announced their intention to extradite Reese to their estate for the trials related to Laura Kelly and Jessica's murders once the Oklahoma trial concluded. Tikafany's trial, which had been indefinitely postponed, resumed in May 2021 at the Oklahoma County District Court. On May 28, 2021, the jury found Reese guilty. The judge was straightforward and direct in his words. On August 19, 2021, he handed down a death sentence to the perpetrator for the abduction and murder of Tiffany, despite Williams' cooperation with law enforcement. This harsh punishment was due to his confession containing partially false information and his failure to disclose his true motives and accurate details of the crime. After being convicted in Oklahoma, William faced another trial in Texas in March 2022 for the murders of Laura Smitha, Kelly Cox, and Jessica Kane. It came as no surprise when he pleaded guilty to all three murders, and the judge delivered the final blow by sentencing him to life imprisonment in June 2022. Justice has finally caught up with him for the devastating crimes he committed against these innocent lives. For years, families have longed for answers about their missing loved ones, enduring the agony of uncertainty. The person responsible for these crimes coldly kept these secrets hidden, only revealing them when it served his own motives. It is disheartening to witness such selfishness. Now, we can only hope that armed with the truth, the families can begin the journey of healing. Providing their loved ones with a proper burial, long overdue, may offer some solace after enduring years of pain. A group of hikers in Tennessee discovered a dead body on December 22, 1974, while using a shortcut close to the Ober Mountain Aerial Tramway, then known as the Gatlinburg Ski Lodge Tramway. The woman's corpse was found next to a tree, face down on her cloak, as if she had been sitting there moments before her untimely demise. The most puzzling part is that it took almost 50 years to identify a woman who went by only Jane Doe, with the body not being identified until 2023. According to the initial forensic reports, she was estimated to be about 35 years old when she passed away. How could it have happened that she ended up in this isolated place? How come it took nearly 50 years to identify this victim? Hello and welcome to Mystery Detective, a channel dedicated to delving into the murky mysteries surrounding both cold and solved cases worldwide. Tennessee is to the east of Gatlinburg, praised for its astounding natural beauty. It is well known as a gateway town, surrounded by the magnificent Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Despite being rather expensive, Gatlinburg has maintained its cozy, family-friendly atmosphere over the years. This quaint mountain community with a resort feel is well known for its rich history, excellent shopping, and stunning scenery. With only 3,800 residents, Gatlinburg might seem like a small town. However, beneath its lovely exterior, the location hides mysteries that have been kept secret for a very long time. It was December 22, 1974, a chilly morning in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. A bunch of Georgian friends made the decision to go hiking in a remote area that isn't often visited. They chose to go to their chalet by a shorter route. As they strolled along the lonely trail, something unexpected caught them off guard. At Gatlinburg Ski Lodge, under the tramway station, were found the remains of a woman beside a tree. She lay face down on an open cloak as if she had been sitting there prior to her untimely demise. The state of affairs was appalling, and the remains had decomposed to such an extent that it seemed impossible to identify her. As they attempted to make sense of the startling discovery, many questions raced through their minds. The men knew they needed to report this to the police. Facing such a terrifying discovery, they quickly called the Gatlinburg police, hoping for a prompt response to look into this horrific circumstance. What they found was a horrifying enigma, a riddle with no clear answers. Identification was nearly impossible due to the decomposition of the dead body. There were no obvious hints discovered in the area or close to her body that would have indicated who she was or how she died. This woman seemed to have been consumed by the remoteness of the place. Authorities encountered an investigation that appeared to grow more intricate by the minute as they started their probe. Her remains, when found, revealed that she had passed away approximately 2 months prior to their discovery. The investigators later referred to this woman as Jane Doe because they had no idea who she was. According to the assessment, Jane Doe was 5 feet 8 inches tall, white, and between 30 and 45 years old. Her weight was about 140 pounds. Her hair, which was cut short and had a blonde and brown combination, was found mostly near her remains. When Jane Doe was found, she had no shoes on and was only wearing short brown men's socks. Beside her, Her sweater and coat were neatly laid out. She wore extra-large male-like marpie slacks, a white short-sleeve shirt with yellow flowers, and a white button-down sweet tree sweater. There was no finding of any jewelry or other personal items she might have had on her at the time. In the absence of immediate identification, authorities turned to the resources at their disposal. Both her DNA and dental records were available for potential future research. Her fingerprints were regrettably unusable, which increased the mystery surrounding her case. Identifying Jane Doe's body proved to be a challenging task for Sevier County Medical Examiner Dr. John Hickey. Given the complexity of the situation, Dr. Hickey sought assistance from the state's forensic anthropologist, William Bass. They consented to have the body brought to the hospital mortuary for an autopsy. The investigation into Jane Doe's unexplained death commenced, and case number 74-11 was assigned to it. The goal of the autopsy was to determine what caused her death. Regretfully, the report did not provide a conclusive cause of death, despite the best efforts of the medical professionals. Although this finding eliminated the possibility of foul play, it raised more questions about Jane Doe's demise. In January of 1975, the hunt for the identity of this enigmatic woman intensified. Investigators put in a lot of overtime, contacting neighboring states such as South Carolina, Kentucky, Virginia, North Carolina, Alabama, and Georgia, and writing letters to different police departments. The TBI and FBI were contacted to offer support. They searched for clues to her identity, but were unable to find any, which led to a depressing stop. Investigators were baffled by the Jane Doe mystery for years. They created a composite image of her face in 2007 using computer technology. The investigators were able to get a glimpse of her actual appearance thanks to this incredible reconstruction. Her height, weight, hair color, and eye color were all calculated in the hopes that this composite would help someone remember her and help identify her. But when this new lead failed to yield a breakthrough, investigators' hopes were dashed again. Unfazed by the persistent challenges, they looked into a state-of-the-art identification technique in 2007 by utilizing the dental identification system of the National Crime Information Center. Jane Doe's identity remained a mystery in spite of this. It seemed that the case would never be resolved. In an effort to find out the truth, the case was reported to the National Missing and Unidentified Person Systems. The identity of Jane Doe remained a mystery for decades despite constant investigation. Consequently, this case eventually turned cold. Just like a lot of others, Detective Cindy Myers of the Gatlinburg Police Department took on this case in 2021. Myers had been plagued by the mystery of the mysterious Jane Doe for a considerable amount of time, even after years of intensive research. She wasn't sure the mystery would ever be unraveled, but Detective Myers was determined to revive the cold case, even though she knew that technology had advanced significantly since the 1970s. A specialized laboratory in Texas, renowned for its proficiency in forensic genetic genealogy testing, was the place Detective Myers turned to for answers. A US-based company called Offram focuses on utilizing genetic genealogy to crack cold cases, like unsolved murders and disappearances, through the use of single nucleotide polymorphism and short tandem repeat testing. They provide law enforcement agencies with the instruments and techniques necessary to ascertain family ties among victims, regardless of how closely or distantly related they are. They also offer DNA forensic genome sequencing as one of their services. Jane Doe's skeletal remains were carefully transported to Offram's lab, where a thorough examination was conducted. A thorough DNA profile was created by Offram's experts using forensic gray genome sequencing. The DNA profile was utilized by Offram's genetic genealogy team to locate potential Jane Doe relatives. They carefully pieced together a likely connection to the unidentified woman, following each lead that led them down a convoluted path through public records and family trees. It was a challenging process that required perseverance and unwavering concentration. February of 2023 brought rewards for their efforts. Officials from Offram called Detective Cindy Myers with some startling information. They had found a possibility in a mass to an Arkansas-based woman. Investigators traveled to find this woman, and they learned an incredible fact. She disclosed that her sister had vanished in August of 1974, with the last known sighting occurring in Tennessee. This discovery allowed for the critical piece of the puzzle to be assembled. The woman in Arkansas promptly provided a DNA sample, which was then submitted for direct comparison with Jane Doe's remains. Finally, after all these years, the result was known. Charlotte Roberta Henry, who was only 35 years old when she passed away, was positively identified as Jane Doe. She was the sister of the individual whose DNA was obtained for comparative analysis. On January 4, 1939, Charlotte Roberta Henry was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to Paul and Roberta. Her sister's name remains unknown, but she had a brother named Paul Henry. But what is known about her early years is scarce. She had blonde-brown hair, hazel eyes, and was about 5 feet 8 inches tall. We don't know anything about her marital status or if she had children. The only thing that is known for sure is that her family last saw her at her father's funeral in April of 1974. All communication with her abruptly stopped after that terrible incident. Her family didn't receive a letter from her until August of that year. The family had no idea that this would be the last letter they would receive from her. The authorities never wavered in their quest for answers, and the confirmation of Jane Doe's identity as Charlotte Roberta Henry was a momentous occasion. They have now received closure on this protracted case. Although the reason for Charlotte's passing and the events leading up to it are still unknown, her identification ends a nearly half-century-long mystery. The Gatlinburg Police Department's investigative division has received praise from Police Chief Randy Brackens for their unwavering commitment to solving this case. Over the years, a number of detectives in our investigative division have worked this case to ascertain Ms. Henry's identity. Despite a tragic conclusion, the revelation provides much-needed peace to Ms. Henry's sister, who had been living in constant uncertainty for almost 50 years about her sister's whereabouts. Now that the family has answers thanks to the investigators' persistence, the situation's ongoing tragedy can be put to rest. Though it is impossible to claim that this poor victim received justice, at least this tragic case was resolved when it appeared impossible at first. What do you think happened to Charlotte Roberta Henry? Lynn Ernon was born in June 1956 in Madison, the capital of Wisconsin, USA. She was the only daughter of Lorraine and Robert Ernon. Her arrival was a joyous and significant event for the newlyweds. Robert, a World War II veteran, had started his own plumbing business upon returning to the United States, while Lorraine was involved in real estate sales. Their stable financial situation allowed them to provide Lynn with abundant opportunities. Robert and Lorraine were known for their warmth, and their home was always filled with joy and the company of friends and loved ones. It was no surprise that Lynn, from a young age, exhibited an outgoing and friendly nature. Her parents owned a cabin outside the city, which quickly became her favorite place. Lynn eagerly counted down the days to spend her school vacations there. For her father, these visits were perfect for a getaway, while Lorraine loved the peaceful and beautiful surroundings filled with lakes and tranquility. As a fervent nature lover, it was there that Lynn developed a special affection for animals. It wasn't long before this fondness turned into a passion for rescuing and caring for abandoned animals, with a particular soft spot for cats, making it common for her to always have a new pet. During her high school years, Lynn's keen interest in maintaining her appearance became evident to everyone. After graduating in 1974, she chose not to pursue a conventional university education, but instead decided to become a hairdresser. Encouraged by her father, Lynn opened her own salon, and in a short time, thanks to her people skills, she built a good clientele. During this period, she formed a close friendship with Corinne Posa. Also from Madison, Corinne was married. The two soon discovered they shared an appreciation for the simple things in life. Corinne admired Lynn's ability to think carefully about her decisions and manage her finances prudently, leading to a life without unnecessary luxuries. In 1983, Lynn started a romantic relationship with Jim Kelleher. Although few details of his biography are known, it is clear that his friends saw him as a man with a free and adventurous spirit. These qualities quickly won Lynn over. With this in mind, the couple embarked on a lifestyle that involved constantly moving, always in search of natural settings that offered the tranquility they yearned for. However, after a few years together, their relationship deteriorated, leading them to separate. Despite this, their affection for each other kept them close friends. During this time, Lynn met Jennifer Flower, a native of Franklin, Wisconsin, who was a single mother to a 9-year-old girl named Jessie Korchevsky. Lynn's kind-hearted nature led her to support both mother and daughter, taking a special interest in helping raise young Jessie, to whom she grew very fond. In 1998, Corinne gave birth to her only son, Anthony Pozo. From then on, he became a cherished member of Lynn's extended family. As he grew, Anthony enjoyed spending time with the Ernons, whether it was playing with Robert, who often shared stories about World War II, or watching classic movies with Lynn. In the summer of 2002, when Jessie graduated from high school, Lynn was bursting with pride. She would often show photos of the two of them at the graduation ceremony to visiting friends. 5 years later, when Robert passed away, The loss was so profound for Lynn that she struggled with depression. However, thanks to her unyielding spirit and optimism, she eventually overcame this tough period. Meanwhile, her beloved Jessie was having a hard time adjusting to adulthood. Deciding not to pursue a college education, she frequently changed jobs. But these were not the only troubling signs. In February 2010, seeking quick money, Jessie opened a bank account under the names of a neighbor couple and took out loans totaling $4,000. 2 months later, she committed even more serious acts of fraud, this time targeting her own mother. Without Jennifer's knowledge, Jessie took her social security card, IDs, checks, and car title and secured a loan of over $6,000. She also obtained a car title loan. When an arrest warrant was issued for Jessie, she attempted to flee and used fraudulent checks to pay for a hotel. However, the authorities caught up with her and she was arrested. Eventually, Jessie was sentenced to 2 years in prison before becoming eligible for parole. In 2013, the death of Lorraine was another significant blow for Lynn. During this painful time, the unwavering support of her friend, Corinne, along with visits from Jennifer and Jessie, who was now back on the outside after serving her sentence, were crucial in helping her heal. Lynn continued to live as she always had, focusing on saving money and enjoying the company of her beloved cats. Additionally, Lynn avoided using technology and did not own a cell phone or computer. She preferred handling her transactions with cash or checks, a method Anthony found outdated but also charming. Although she had a credit card, she used it sparingly and always tried to pay off any debt quickly. Meanwhile, Jessie had found a new job and started dating a man named Scott, who was single but had a daughter from a previous relationship. They soon decided to move in together and discovered a shared passion for casinos. Visiting them twice a week, Jessie often spent all her money at these establishments. In early 2016, Lynn began experiencing various health problems, including back issues and heart and liver complications, which required constant medical attention. As a result, she spent most of her time at home. Initially, Jennifer took on the role of her caregiver, but eventually, it was her younger and more energetic daughter, Jessie, who assumed the responsibility. This gave Jessie access to Lynn's credit cards. Additionally, Lynn signed blank checks for her to assist with groceries and medications. In August 2016, when Anthony started university, he made it a habit to stop by Lynn's house on his way to campus. During their shared lunches, Lynn expressed her desire to support him financially with his studies. However, Anthony was adamant about not wanting their relationship to be seen as a ploy for financial gain. Despite this, Lynn always found a way to give him some money for his expenses. In contrast, during her frequent visits, Jessie began excessively using Lynn's credit cards, taking cash advances, making online purchases, and spending more than Lynn could afford. She squandered money in casinos and city bars, knowing Lynn did not closely monitor her finances. As Jessie's spending increased, her job performance declined and she was eventually fired. However, she kept this a secret so neither her boyfriend nor her friends knew about it. She even lied to Scott, claiming that Lynn was in intensive care due to a coma, giving herself more time to do as she pleased without being at home. Aware of her declining health and the possibility of needing to move to a nursing home, Lynn was worried about the well-being of her cats. She entrusted Jessie with their care and gave her power of attorney to manage her belongings if necessary. She also drafted her will, naming Jessie and Anthony as the main beneficiaries. She informed both of them, albeit separately, about this decision. From that moment on, Jessie focused on finding the best way to permanently remove her benefactor from the picture. The devious plan didn't take long to form in Jessie's mind. As she was responsible for administering Lynn's medications, she discovered that among them were eye drops containing tetrahydrosaline. After researching online, she learned that ingesting large amounts of this substance could be fatal. One night, after returning home visibly drunk from a bar outing with friends, Jessie told her boyfriend Scott that someone might have spiked her drink with eye drops, causing her drowsiness. It was late and Scott, also tired, dismissed her strange claim. In the last week of September 2018, Lynn was hospitalized and the medical staff recommended transferring her to a long-term rehabilitation unit. Lynn adamantly refused the suggestion, feeling ashamed of her physical condition. She forbade Jessie from mentioning her hospitalization to anyone, determined to avoid being seen in such a deplorable state. So unlike the woman she once was, that same week, remembering he had missed her birthday, Jim tried to reach out to her. However, Jesse answered Lynn's home phone and told him that Lynn was hospitalized and didn't want visitors. After being discharged from the hospital with a recommendation for home medical care, a first visit was scheduled for October 1st, 2018. However, Lynn postponed it to October 5th, choosing to remain isolated from everyone. By this time, Jesse had already spent around $144,000 from Lynn's accounts, but she wanted it all. On October 3rd, 2018, taking advantage of Lynn's negligence towards her health, Jesse visited her under the pretext of administering her medications. While preparing the usual pills, she secretly poured the contents of 6 bottles of eye drops into a glass of water and offered it to Lynn. The poison took effect, and Lynn gradually lost consciousness and died. Jesse meticulously staged the scene, spreading some crushed pills on a table near Lynn's body to give the impression of an overdose. She then called 911, reporting that she had found her friend unconscious and not breathing. When the responders arrived, they found Lynn lifeless in a reclining chair in the living room. In her statement to Officer Kelsey, Jesse explained her relationship with Lynn and her role as her caregiver, suggesting that Lynn, possibly overwhelmed by her health issues, had decided to take her own life. After transporting the body to the morgue, the police drafted a preliminary report considering the case as a possible suicide. However, during interviews with her close circle, Jim expressed shock at such a possibility. He stated that the woman he had known for many years would never make such a decision, as it simply wasn't in her nature. Anthony shared a similar view, telling investigators that despite Lynn's fragile health, he had always seen in her a strong optimism. When Anthony and Jesse met for the first time since the tragedy, Anthony couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between his own grief and Jesse's cold detachment and interest in the inheritance she was about to receive. Around this time, Jesse opened an account at a department store in Lynn's name to obtain a credit card. Shortly after, barely a week after Lynn's death, she announced a garage sale on her social media, selling Lynn's personal belongings, including her furniture. By the end of 2018, when Jesse appeared with expensive Christmas gifts, Scott became seriously alarmed. Just weeks later, the county medical examiner's office, which conducted toxicology tests on Lynn's body, found high levels of tetrahydrosaline in her blood, exacerbated by her other medications. The experts concluded that her death was not the result of self-harm or an accident, as it was impossible to ingest such a dose through normal eye use. The head of the medical examiner's office submitted the toxicology report to the authorities, prompting the sheriff's office to reopen the investigation. Once Jesse learned that the investigation had been reopened, she was keen to know the results, but the police refused to disclose them to her. In the following months, the investigation increasingly pointed to Jesse as the main suspect. On July 9, 2019, Jesse was arrested and interviewed by the police. During the interview, she tried to convince the authorities of her frustration over not knowing the cause of Lynn's death. The most striking detail was her claim that Lynn was a habitual user of both legal and illegal substances, although she was careful to note that this never prevented Lynn from being functional. Jesse alleged that while she always made sure Lynn adhered to her treatments, Lynn would abuse alcohol or pills, and during those times, thoughts of self-harm would emerge. In a subsequent interview, when questioned about her financial incentive for caring for Lynn all that time, Jesse explained that although there was never an official agreement, Lynn often gave her checks or allowed her to use her credit card. She emphasized to the agents that Lynn was always generous with her resources, a quality that stood out even more as she was aware of her impending end. During the third interview, the detectives played their strongest card, informing Jesse about the lethal tetrahydrosaline poisoning. Jesse immediately claimed that Lynn often used eye drops in large quantities, buying multiple bottles at once. The agents responded by pointing out that no such bottles were found at Lynn's residence and that the substance levels in her system were inconsistent with ocular use. Faced with the evidence, Jesse's explanations became increasingly contradictory. Although she initially found the idea of voluntary ingestion hard to believe, she then suggested that Lynn might have researched ways to end her life and settled on poisoning. Regarding the crushed pills found on Lynn's body, Jesse said that Lynn had difficulty swallowing. However, the detectives, suspecting it was a staged scene, made their thoughts clear to Jesse. In response, Jesse vehemently denied any involvement in Lynn's death, even suggesting that the toxicologist had made an error, claiming she had never heard of the lethal effect of simple eye drops. The authorities then decided to question Scott. When they mentioned that Lynn had been administered high doses of the eye drop component, Scott recalled Jesse's strange comment about someone possibly spiking her drink with eye drops, causing her drowsiness. This led to another interrogation where Jessie again denied knowing about the substance's action. However, this time she changed her initial story, alleging that Lynn had confessed to her about unsuccessfully trying to take her own life with pills. According to Jessie, Lynn began mixing the eye drops with vodka over several days, though it only caused her stomach discomfort. Jessie also claimed to have seen Lynn drinking this mixture the day before her death. She then recounted that on the morning of October 3, 2018, Lynn asked for a bottle of water that she had previously filled with the contents of 6 eye drop bottles and vodka. They argued because Jessie refused to give it to her. But eventually, thinking it wouldn't be lethal given Lynn's habitual consumption of the mixture, she relented. When confronted by investigators about why she hadn't mentioned this before and why she didn't alert anyone to prevent the fatal outcome, Jessie simply stated that if Lynn didn't want to live anymore, she had every right to act accordingly. Despite her efforts to evade responsibility and avoid charges, the review of the credit card statements revealed unusual spending patterns for someone like Lynn, who rarely left the house. There were transactions in bars and casinos, places Lynn never frequented. At this stage, Anthony's cooperation with the authorities proved invaluable as he highlighted Lynn's financial habits, which starkly contrasted with these expenditures. Jessie's criminal history of fraud and her gambling addiction further exposed her malicious intent to the police, making her motives to harm Lynn crystal clear. Consequently, she was formally charged with first-degree intentional homicide and 2 counts of grand theft. Though she pleaded not guilty, she was held without bail with a bond set at $1 million. While in jail awaiting trial, formed a friendship with another inmate named Magdalena. Jessie confided in Magdalena that Lynn had died from an overdose of medications and even revealed that she had spent Lynn's money in casinos and on luxuries she otherwise couldn't afford. The process to bring Jessie to justice faced some delays, but finally commenced on October 24, 2023, after a 5-year wait. In his opening statement, the prosecutor painted an unflattering picture of the accused for the jury. In response, the defense, referring to Lynn as a mother figure to their client, countered by claiming that Lynn herself would have disagreed with the prosecution's narrative if she were present, dismissing it as an unfounded story. The attorney described Lynn as a woman with self-destructive tendencies, insisting on the theory of a consummated self-harm. However, the testimony of the medical examiner starkly contrasted with this narrative, asserting that the poisoning was undoubtedly caused by a third party. He emphasized Jessie's suspicious insistence on knowing the cause of Lynn's death. The prosecution revisited this point, suggesting that during her crime planning, Jessie hadn't anticipated a toxicology test for tetrahydrozoline on her victim. When Jim and Anthony took the stand, they both agreed that Lynn would never have allowed Jessie to squander her assets. Then an unexpected testimony emerged, further cornering the accused and solidifying the case against her. The significant revelations came from Magdalena, Jessie's cellmate. After 2 days of deliberations on Tuesday, November 14th, the jury delivered its verdict. As the judge read the jury's decision, Jessie broke down in tears, aware that she faced the possibility of a mandatory life sentence. Outside the courthouse, the prosecutor expressed his condolences to Lynn's family, satisfied with the verdict. Anthony expressed immense gratitude to the detectives and prosecutors for their relentless pursuit of the truth. In his own words, thanks to them he could confirm what he had always suspected, that something was not right with Jessie. The sentencing hearing took place on Friday, April 5, 2024. Accompanied by her new attorney, Jessie spoke for 2 hours about what she considered a flawed legal process, claiming she had not received effective defense. Nevertheless, after her testimony, the judge sentenced Jessie to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years for the crime against Lynn Hernan. Additionally, she must serve 5 consecutive years for the 2 counts of theft, making her ineligible for parole until she is 80 years old. Furthermore, she was ordered to pay $386,000 in restitution through an escrow account for any money earned from interviews, book deals, movies, or documentaries related to the case. Present in the courtroom during the victim impact statements, Anthony had a few words for Jessie, wishing that her time behind bars would allow her to reflect on her actions. He said that, as he had hoped, her facade had finally ended and she could no longer deceive anyone. Although satisfied with the sentence, he expressed that it was impossible not to miss Lynn, who had been like an aunt to him. In honor of that love, Anthony plans to choose a monument where Lynn's remains can be laid to rest, seeking to provide her soul with the same tranquility and peace she always sought in life. Ellie Gould was born on February 6, 2002, in the small British town of Cown. She came from a big, close-knit family. Besides her parents and older brother, she had a lot of relatives living nearby, and they were all very close. From a young age, Ellie had a deep love for animals, especially horses. Her parents would often take her to the stables, and eventually they decided to get her a pony. Ellie got into horseback riding, started participating in various events, and achieved some pretty impressive results. Besides that, she planned to study psychology after high school and join the mounted police. By early 2019, at the age of 17, Ellie was finishing her last year of school. She had plenty of friends there because she always tried to get along with everyone and avoid any conflicts. That same year, a classmate asked Ellie out, and they quickly started dating. Ellie, who had never been in a relationship before, was excited about this new experience. On May 3rd, Ellie woke up early as usual and started getting ready for school. She didn't have any morning classes that day, so she only needed to be at school by noon for just a few lessons. She had arranged for a friend to pick her up, said goodbye to her parents as they left for work, and waited at home. A few hours later, Ellie texted her friend, letting her know she had decided to skip school that day and stay home, telling her not to come by. Her friend figured Ellie just didn't feel like going in for a couple of classes and headed off without her. Around 3 p.m., Ellie's father came home from work. When he walked into the kitchen, he was met with a horrifying sight. His daughter was lying face down on the floor in a large pool of blood. At first, he thought Ellie might have fallen and hit her head, or gotten into some other accident. But then he saw the blood splattered all over the kitchen and noticed a knife lodged in his daughter's neck, with her hands gripping the handle. He immediately called an ambulance and tried to perform first aid, following the operator's instructions, but Ellie showed no signs of life, and her father realized she was already gone. When the paramedics arrived, all they could do was confirm Ellie's death, estimating she had been dead for at least 4 hours. They also saw multiple stab wounds on her body, most of them concentrated in her neck area. Ellie's parents were in complete disbelief. Even when the police told them that their daughter had been murdered, her father struggled to accept it. He was in a deep state of shock, convinced that what had happened to Ellie was just some kind of terrible accident. Her body was handed over to the medical examiners, who established more details about what had happened. Along with the 13 stab wounds, they discovered signs of strangulation on her neck. It seemed the attacker had failed to kill her that way, so he grabbed a kitchen knife. They also found several defensive wounds, showing that Ellie had fought back, desperately trying to defend herself from the attacker. While forensic experts examined the crime scene, the police began their investigation. They brought Ellie's parents to the station and asked if they knew anyone who might have wanted to harm their daughter. After looking at each other, both parents could only think of one name: Thomas, Ellie's boyfriend. Her mom explained that Ellie and Thomas had started dating just a few months earlier, and at first, Ellie was thrilled. She had never been in a relationship before, and Thomas seemed like a great guy. He was a top student, played sports, and was part of the school's rugby team. But things between them started to go downhill pretty quickly. Thomas wanted to spend almost all of his time with her, and he became more demanding about it as the days went by. Ellie, on the other hand, couldn't give him that much attention. She needed to focus on her final exams and take care of her ponies. As time went on, Thomas's behavior only got worse. He would get upset with her, accusing her of not wanting to spend time together, and became increasingly controlling. He would call and text her constantly throughout the day, and then get angry when she couldn't respond right away. Ellie's parents had always felt that Thomas wasn't the right match for her. When he visited their home, he would mostly stay quiet, which they found odd. Ellie, on the other hand, was very outgoing, and her parents figured the relationship wouldn't last long. And they were right. Just a few months into the relationship, Ellie started thinking about breaking up with him. Not only was Thomas's behavior making her more and more uncomfortable, but she also realized that she needed to focus on her exams and getting into college. In the end, she decided to end things and broke up with him on May 2nd, just one day before she was killed. The police also spoke with Ellie's friends, who shared more details about the breakup. Ellie had told them that Thomas didn't take it well. He kept trying to convince her to stay together, calling her constantly and asking to meet, but Ellie refused to talk about it. Their mutual friends mentioned that Thomas's behavior changed drastically after the breakup. That same day, he posted on social media saying that the past few days had been incredibly hard for him. Not only had he just broken up with Ellie, but his father had been diagnosed with cancer and his aunt had recently passed away. Thomas ended the post by saying he was struggling to cope and planned to seek help from the school counselor. After seeing the post, Some of Thomas's friends reached out to offer their support. When they spoke with him, they noticed he seemed genuinely depressed. But when the police asked if they thought Thomas could have harmed Ellie, his friends couldn't believe it and insisted that it was impossible. With all this information in hand, the investigators decided to talk to Thomas. But before that, they examined Ellie's phone and discovered that Thomas had messaged her that morning, asking to meet. They went to Thomas's house and asked where he had been that morning. Thomas explained that his mom had driven him to school, but he was too upset over the breakup and his other problems to attend classes. So instead of going in, he waited until his mom left, walked to the bus stop, and headed back home. On the way, he messaged one of his teachers to let them know he wouldn't be at school today. According to Thomas, he didn't leave the house after that. He spent the rest of the day doing homework and relaxing. During the conversation, he also asked if Ellie was okay, and the officers told him about her death. After speaking with Thomas, the investigators went to talk to his mother, and here they encountered an interesting twist. She confirmed that she had dropped him off at school that morning, but when she returned home later, Thomas wasn't there. The police returned to talk to him again. He explained that he hadn't wanted his mom to know he skipped the entire day of school, so he hid in the closet and waited until she left for work. During the conversation, the officers noticed fresh scratches on Thomas's face. When asked how he got them, Thomas claimed he did it himself, but the investigators were skeptical. Given that the medical examiners concluded Ellie had fought back during the attack, these injuries could have easily been inflicted during the struggle. The police also questioned all of Ellie's neighbors, and one of them shared an interesting observation. That morning, they had seen a man approaching Ellie's house. However, due to the distance, the neighbor couldn't make out the man's face or any other useful features. They could only provide a rough description of what he was wearing. The police decided to check Thomas's alibi by looking at the GPS data from his phone. They confirmed that he returned home after leaving school, but what they discovered next sharply contradicted his story. At 10:50 a.m., Thomas's phone disconnected from his home Wi-Fi and began moving in the direction of Ellie's house. Just 3 minutes later, his phone was located near her home, where it remained for about an hour. At 11:51 a.m., the phone started heading back towards Thomas's house and reconnected to his home Wi-Fi within minutes. The police realized that it would have been impossible for Thomas to cover the distance between his and Ellie's home on foot in just 3 minutes, since he lived in a neighboring village several miles away. Then they reviewed surveillance footage along the route and spotted a silver Ford Focus, which belonged to Thomas's parents. The movement of the car matched the phone's location data, leading investigators to conclude that Thomas must have been driving it. The camera also captured the same car leaving Thomas's house again and returning just 18 minutes later. The investigators couldn't find any footage that showed exactly where Thomas had gone during that short trip. However, they managed to narrow down the general area where he might have stopped. Since it seemed like Thomas had only been there for about a minute, the police suspected he might have been getting rid of evidence. Their hunch soon proved correct. While searching a small wooded area, officers found a trash bag containing blood-stained rags and an apron. With all this evidence, the police obtained a warrant to search Thomas's home. They asked him to provide the clothes he had been wearing that morning, and Thomas said he had put them in the washing machine. The officers seized the clothing, along with his shoes, and sent everything to the lab. Forensic experts quickly conducted the analysis and found traces of blood on nearly all of his clothes. Although Thomas had tried to wash them, the experts were able to extract a DNA sample from the blood. The analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Ellie, just like the blood found on the rags in the woods. Thomas's clothes also matched the description given by Ellie's neighbor, who had seen a man near her house that morning. All of this, combined with other evidence, painted a pretty clear picture of what had likely happened that day. According to the investigators' version, Thomas had planned the murder from the start. After his mom dropped him off at school, he immediately took a bus back home, hid in the closet, and waited for her to leave. He then drove the family car to Ellie's house. It seems that Ellie let him in, possibly thinking he just wanted to talk, and they ended up in the kitchen. Based on the medical examiner's report, Thomas tried to strangle Ellie, which is when he got the scratches on his face. When he couldn't kill her that way, he grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed her 13 times. For the next hour, Thomas tried to clean up the crime scene, using the rags and leaving smudges all over the kitchen. He then gathered the rags into a trash bag and tried washing his sneakers in the sink, where traces of blood were also found. After that, he wiped the knife with a kitchen apron, likely to erase his fingerprints, and tossed the apron into the bag. Then he placed the knife in Ellie's hand and positioned it around her neck, seemingly hoping the police would think she had done it herself and wouldn't suspect him. Detectives also recalled the message Ellie had sent to her friend, saying she wasn't going to school and asking not to pick her up. They concluded this message was sent after she had already died. It seems Thomas had taken her iPhone, unlocked it using Ellie's fingerprint, and sent the message himself. Apparently, he didn't want the body to be found so soon. But that wasn't the end of Thomas's attempts to cover his tracks. After throwing his clothes in the washing machine at home and dumping the bag of evidence in the woods, he ran into a neighbor and asked for a ride to school. There, he attended the remaining classes, chatted with his friends, and even stopped by the school nurse. He told her how difficult the last few days had been for him and how he was struggling to cope. The nurse, concerned about his emotional state, called his mother, who then took him home. Later that day, Thomas posted on social media about his breakup with Ellie and the other problems he'd been dealing with. At the time, Ellie's body hadn't been discovered yet, and police believed that all of these actions were part of his attempt to create an alibi. It took the police only a few hours to gather all this evidence, and by the same evening, the 17-year-old was arrested on suspicion of murder. During the interrogation, Thomas continued to deny any involvement, and the case was eventually sent to court. The first hearing took place on August 29th, 4 months after the murder. This time, Thomas suddenly changed his story. He stood before the judge and confessed to killing Ellie, though there was a catch. According to his new version, he had gone to Ellie's house that morning to study for their exams. During their study session, an argument broke out, and from that point on, he claimed he could hardly remember anything. He recalled trying to strangle her, but said the rest of his actions were a complete blur. The prosecution didn't buy Thomas's new story, pointing out several major inconsistencies. First of all, Ellie didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore, and all her friends and family knew this. So, the idea that they were studying together seemed highly unlikely, especially since her friend was supposed to pick her up soon. Thomas's claim of memory loss also didn't add up with the fact that he spent an hour trying to clean up the crime scene. On top of that, he placed the murder weapon in Ellie's hand as if trying to make it look like she did it herself. After that, he went on to get rid of the evidence, create an alibi at school, and even tried to wash all of his clothes. Given all of this, the court sided with the prosecution, and in November 2019, Thomas was found guilty of murder. Before the sentencing, he gave a final statement, apologizing to Ellie's family and expressing genuine regret for his actions. However, there was another issue at the end of the trial. Thomas was only 17 at the time of the murder, which directly impacted his sentence. The judge sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole in just 12 years. He also added an additional 5 years for the brutality of the crime. This means Thomas could potentially be released at 34 years old. This verdict sparked outrage not only from the victim's family but also among many citizens across the country. People were baffled as to how someone who committed premeditated murder could receive such a short sentence. But despite the public outcry, there was nothing anyone could do to change the court's decision. Ellie's father stated that this sentence puts other women at risk, as Thomas could become a danger to society upon release. He believes that Thomas is a psychopath who should not be let out of prison for the rest of his life. This injustice prompted Ellie's parents to dedicate the next few years to changing the existing legislation. In 2021, they finally achieved progress. The authorities passed Ellie's law, which allows juvenile murderers to receive prison sentences of up to 27 years without parole. Unfortunately, this change will not affect Thomas, as he was convicted under the old laws. The only thing Ellie's parents managed to secure was a requirement for Thomas to undergo extensive therapy after his release, in hopes that it would prevent him from committing similar crimes in the future. Since then, Ellie's parents have been organizing events in memory of their daughter, inviting children to ride her horses. According to her mother, this activity helps ease the pain of their loss, as horseback riding was Ellie's greatest passion. In 2011, 33-year-old Anthony Tyrone Lee lived in Longview, Texas with his mother, Sharon Bowers. That June, he was about to make a trip to Houston, where he would be helping his sister move into a new home. Prior to leaving on that trip, he had plans to attend a rodeo with his mother. However, on June 25th, the day of the rodeo, his mother arrived home only to find that her son was not there. Sharon quickly realized that something was not right. The ironing board had been set up and the clothes Anthony had planned to wear to the rodeo were with it. However, one of the pant legs was still hanging off of the side of the board, as though Anthony had been in the middle of ironing the pants and was somehow interrupted. Anthony's clothing and shoes were still in the home, and as best as Sharon could determine, her son had left home wearing his house shoes, which was out of character for him. Anthony's mood had recently changed, and he had been acting in the weeks before he went missing. He had $600 in the bank, which remained in his account untouched. 3 weeks after Anthony's disappearance, Sharon began receiving disturbing phone calls. At first, the caller would play what Sharon described as some kind of death song. Then came calls from someone telling Sharon that's what he gets for snitching. The last person Anthony saw prior to his disappearance, as far as his mother knows, was a known local drug dealer who had wrecked Anthony's car a week before he went missing. Sharon feared that Anthony may have gotten himself into a situation where either he felt like he needed to go into hiding or someone else was holding him somewhere. However, since Anthony left behind his belongings and his money, and because of the phone calls, Sharon is not optimistic that he will return home. "I don't feel like my child is still living," she told the Longview News Journal. "After all the flyers and all the friends he has, it's just not like him to not call and talk to anybody." The Longview Police Department ran out of leads to follow by the first anniversary of Anthony's disappearance, but has not given up on his case. Anthony is listed in state and national missing persons databases. "There's somebody that knows what happened to my son, and all we want is to know too," Sharon Bauer said in 2012. At 11:30 p.m. on March 9, 2014, at 3385 Airport Road in Dalton, Georgia, a gas station called Cancun's Express was the scene of a shocking discovery. 2 regular customers entered the store and immediately noticed it was in complete disarray. Mark, one of the customers, peered over the counter and saw money, lottery tickets, and other items scattered across the floor. It was clear a robbery had taken place, but there was no one around, and the store was eerily silent. Mark decided to investigate further and noticed the door to the employees' area at the back was slightly ajar. He cautiously looked inside and saw a person's legs, surrounded by a lot of blood. Mark and the other customer quickly left the store and waited outside for the police. But there was still uncertainty about whether the person behind the door was alive. One brave customer decided to re-enter the store to check. It didn't take long for her to confirm that the individual was already deceased. The victim was 37-year-old Diaby Kalidas Chadhari, known to everyone as DK. Originally from India, DK had traveled to the United States alone, eager to embrace a new life. From the moment he arrived, he worked tirelessly to build a fresh start and immediately felt at home in America. After spending some time in New Jersey, he had moved to Dalton, Georgia, a place he seemed to prefer greatly. As he had come over by himself, people said he had started to create his own little family in Dalton. Becoming close to his coworkers and his customers, DK was now really starting to find his feet in a new routine. He had only been at Cancun's Express for a couple of months, and typically worked the graveyard shift, starting at around 7 p.m. But late nights and long hours didn't ever deter him. His coworkers said the man who called everyone buddy and greeted customers with a big smile made such an effort to remember the regulars and get to know the people he served. They said you couldn't have met a friendlier and kinder person, always happy to talk to anyone about anything, whether they were known to him or just someone topping up their gas, never to return again. He just wanted to make friends, work hard, and enjoy his new life in America. Everyone was in disbelief that this had happened to him. When police arrived at the store, it was evident the attack had been a very frenzied and vicious one, with the motive appearing to be a robbery. DK had tape over his mouth and eyes and had been stabbed multiple times. He was covered in defensive wounds and had tried hard to fight back. The medical examiner later determined he had survived the whole ordeal, only to bleed out about 10 minutes after the attack had finished. On the floor under a trolley near to DK's body, they found their first piece of evidence, a mobile phone which was swiftly bagged up. With 7 cameras covering the whole area, even if a few weren't working or were bad quality, detectives were confident they would be able to get something from them. They were elated, however, when they realized all of the cameras were working perfectly, and the images were pretty clear too. In the moments before the attack, DK was serving customers as usual and walking around the store checking the aisles. It was now around 10:30 p.m., about 4.5 hours into his shift. Nothing seemed to be off, and as the store seemed quiet, DK headed over to the back room. Without warning, in a split second the perpetrator appeared chasing him from behind, pinning him into the back room. They were wearing a white hoodie pulled over their face, sunglasses, latex gloves, and a big black bag. DK tried to slam the door, but the killer was too quick. Once inside, they started stamping on him, brandishing a gun. DK managed to hit the gun away, and it slid across the tiles. But the perpetrator pulled out a knife and started stabbing him repeatedly before putting duct tape over his eyes and mouth. They then squatted down next to him before pressing their hands over his face, suffocating him as he bled out. While all this was going on, there were now customers walking around the store, completely unaware as to what was unfolding in the back. The perpetrator then exited the back room and paced around the aisles. One customer by the name of Charles was now at the counter looking to buy a drink. But he was met with, unbeknownst to him, the killer at the cash register, who shook their head and indicated Charles needed to leave. He walked outside quickly and afraid, and after the store was empty, the suspect proceeded to ransack the cash register area, taking a huge roll of lottery tickets and around $200 in cash. They took it all into the back where they had left their bag, shoving it all in there. They then calmly walked out of the store and off into the night. Police were shocked at just how cold-blooded, vicious, and remorseless this crime was, with some saying they had never even heard of anything like this in their careers, let alone seen it with their own eyes. Even though the footage of the murder happening did not show the killer's face, it was still a strong set of videos. It was clear, confirmed the timings, and showed the person's height, build, and clothing very well. Charles, who had interacted with the suspect at the counter, came forward. He said it was a really unsettling moment, and he didn't know what was going on. But he knew he needed to leave the premises. Whereas the police initially thought they were looking for a male suspect, Charles's story made them realize they were not. Realizing there was no one there to serve him, he went to the counter to pick up his card and leave. He then saw the person in the white hoodie lurking behind the register. He said she looked at him and said, "We're not open for business." He told officers it sounded like she was putting on a fake voice. Looking back at the footage to just before the murder, the camera at the entrance to Cancun's Express showed the woman entering the store, but she was wearing all black. She headed into the bathroom where she changed into the white hoodie she would shortly be seen in. Detectives released the footage, feeling confident they could get a lead off of the back of it. And very quickly they did. It had now been just over 24 hours since DK had been murdered, and the police received an anonymous tip. The caller said they needed to look for a person by the name of Sky Raven Marie Mims, a 21-year-old model, aspiring rapper, and dancer. Sky appeared to have no criminal history and wasn't known to the authorities at all. So this was a total shock and left the police wondering if they were seeking the right person. But there was another gas station across the road from Cancun's, and this also showed her on these cameras too. In the footage, her hood was now down and they had a pretty clear picture of her face. She had even used her card in this station. No sooner had this tip come in that the forensics on the phone had also come back, and it belonged to Sky Mims. A statewide manhunt was now underway to find her, and the media were running with all the details. There was no indication as to where she was. Her last known address was in Detroit, and it appeared she was bouncing from state to state. Following an extensive 2-day search, Sky Mims was finally located. She had been hiding out in a friend's house about 30 minutes away from Dalton. When police knocked on the door, she had tried to escape. She was naked and screaming at the police to just shoot and kill her. She said, "You saw what I did. You caught me red-handed." She was placed in handcuffs and taken out of the house wrapped in a bedsheet. On the way into the station in the back of the police car, she managed to wriggle out of the handcuffs, something which clearly unnerved the officer driving. In her first interview with the police, she was both aggressive and totally vacant before asking for a lawyer and walking up to the camera in the room and shouting and swearing into it. But officers were gathering so much from the house she had been hiding in that her refusal to talk didn't really matter at this point. Inside her bag were latex gloves, a roll of the same red duct tape that was found around DK's face, some of the lottery tickets, a gun, and a knife, with what they presumed was DK's blood still on it. There was absolutely nothing to suggest that Sky knew DK at all. It was a completely random attack, and police argued that the second she walked into the store she had already decided she was going to kill whoever got in her way. Her DNA was taken and quickly processed, confirming everything they already knew. The expert said she matched at all 15 locations for both gloves. The frequency for that is 1 in 5 quintillion, and the blood on the knife found in her bag matched DK. Sky Mims was charged, and a grand jury soon indicted her on several counts, including felony murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault, burglary, armed robbery, possession of a knife during the commission of a felony, and theft by bringing stolen property into the state, which was a stolen car. As the various procedures and hearings began, everyone that knew DK was still reeling from his death, and the small community was left shaken in the aftermath. A collection jar was set up at the entrance of the store so people could send something to his family back in India and try and help in any way they could. DK's funeral was big, with a lot of people standing along the sides, including detectives who had been working on the case. Skye entered a plea of not guilty to all of the charges, and whilst awaiting trial, she faced a further felony charge of breaking a sprinkler head in her cell, which caused the cell to flood. Her charges were mounting up, and she now had 11 against her. But the most serious of all, felony murder, meant she could potentially face the death penalty if she was found guilty. Before her trial began, she was assessed by a psychologist, who diagnosed her with bipolar disorder. But her attorney said she felt that her client had something more severe and undiagnosed. Her trial finally started just over a year after DK's murder. During the proceedings, Skye either sat and laughed or just stared into space, completely void of any remorse, but seemingly enjoying the attention when she saw people looking at her. She had asked to testify on her own behalf, but her attorney had said no. Many testified, including friends of Skye, who said that in recent months she had become totally obsessed with winning the lottery. She was focused particularly on winning one that could give her $500 a week for life, and these are the exact same tickets she had stolen from the store. Friends said she thought if she won, she would be able to pursue her dream of performing without worrying about funds. After 5 days, the juries entered their deliberations. It took less than an hour for them to return a verdict of guilty on all counts. On the grounds of mental health issues and a previously clean criminal history, Skye's attorney was pushing for the chance of parole to give her a second chance. But the judge said she was read her rights and was more than happy she understood them. Skye's father Mario gave a statement as well, describing their family history of mental health issues, including bipolar disorder and paranoid schizophrenia. Mario also said Skye would tell people she was being chased by aliens, or that people were trying to kill her. Mario had tried to check her into a hospital, but she had left quickly before stealing a car and fleeing. He said, "She kind of slipped out of our hands. We couldn't grab her, touch her, nothing." Despite both he and her attorney's protests, Skye Mims was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge took the potential death penalty off the table after her bipolar disorder diagnosis. And when Skye's attorney expressed her disappointment at the sentence given, the judge pointed out he had already been lenient enough in taking the death penalty out of the equation. He called her crime methodical, vicious, and senseless, and was particularly disgusted when she had started laughing as the evidence was presented. He said life without parole was more than justified considering the circumstances. The defendant has shown zero remorse. She has shown zero acceptance of what she did. We don't think she should ever be free again, he said. It was a good result for the prosecution, and they said, "We are pleased, obviously. We're happy for the community and happy for the family. The evidence in this case was overwhelming, so the verdict is not unexpected. We're just glad to get the case tried and get closure for friends and family that lost a good man." It was soon announced that Skye was seeking a new trial. As a result, in 2019, the charge of theft of a car was reversed, but the murder conviction was upheld and Skye remains in prison, still serving out her life without parole sentence. DK's body was eventually sent back to India to be with his brothers, but the loss his co-workers and friends felt back in America ran deep. He had built a nice life for himself there and made so many new friends. He had many plans and dreams. It was such a heartbreaking end for him. One of his friends said, "DK's smile could brighten your day. He never met a stranger. He spoke to everyone. He would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. He was so kind and had the biggest heart of anyone I know." The case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30th, 1982 in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, and grew up with 3 loving sisters. His parents provided him with an adventurous upbringing, allowing him to attend schools in Switzerland and the Philippines. Ryan's good looks, charming features, and charismatic personality made him a standout among his peers. After completing high school, he attended Indiana University, where he excelled in his studies, graduating with honors in 2005 with a triple major in political science, history, and geography. Following in his family's footsteps, Ryan pursued a career in law and enrolled in Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. His ultimate goal was to run a successful law firm, providing fair and competent legal representation to those who couldn't afford high-priced attorneys. After a painful breakup in 2011, Ryan turned to his cousin, Carissa, for support. During this time, he regularly visited her in Lexington, Kentucky, where he met Shauna Hubers, a native of the city. Shauna was a charming and lively individual with a warm personality that drew people to her. Despite their 8-year age difference, Their mutual attraction grew stronger with each visit Ryan made to Lexington. As they spent more time together, their connection deepened. Shayna began to spend more weekends in Highland Heights, where Ryan lived, taking care of him and cooking for him. However, their promising future came to a devastating end on October 12, 2012. In a distressing 911 call, Shayna revealed that she had just killed her boyfriend Ryan. She described a harrowing scene of domestic violence that had escalated out of control, claiming that Ryan had attempted to physically abuse her and confronted her with a gun. According to Shauna, she panicked and pulled the trigger, shooting Ryan, and then shot him several more times, believing she was putting him out of his misery. Within minutes of Shauna's call, officers arrived at the scene, responding to the shocking tragedy. When police officers arrived, they told Shauna to come out of the apartment with her hands up. First, she was hesitant, but she eventually complied. As she walked out, the officers told her to lie down on the ground. Shauna was clearly upset as she followed their instructions. After handcuffing her and putting her in the patrol car, the officers went into the apartment and found Ryan Poston's body on the dining room floor, covered in blood. The crime scene investigators found that the apartment was slightly messy, but nothing out of the ordinary for a 29-year-old man. The investigators learned that Ryan had a concealed carry permit and owned guns, including the Sig Sauer semi-automatic that Shayna used to shoot him. From the evidence, they determined that Ryan was sitting at the table when Shayna shot him. They knew this because of the blood on the table. However, the fact that many items on the table were undisturbed raised doubts about Shayna's story. If there had been a fight, the items would have been disturbed. The investigators searched the apartment thoroughly, while other officers canvassed the neighborhood, looking for additional information. One neighbor, Nikki, provided valuable information to the detective. Nikki knew Shayna well and believed that Ryan didn't return Shayna's dedication to him. According to Nikki, they frequently argued, often disturbing the peace. Months earlier, Nikki recalled an incident where Shayna came to her door in tears, saying she was afraid if Shayna claimed that Ryan had picked her up and thrown her down the hallway, injuring her. Nikki encouraged Shayna to report the abuse to the police, but Shayna chose not to. At the police station, detectives took Shayna to an interrogation room to question her about shooting Ryan. Before questioning her, they read her Miranda rights, informing her of her right to an attorney. Shayna exercised this right and requested an attorney. However, she chose to talk to the detectives despite this. When asked about the victim, Shayna replied, "The man I killed," which showed a sense of detachment. She claimed she acted in self-defense, saying Ryan had grabbed her by the throat and thrown her around the apartment. Shayna described the night as surreal and out of body. Later in the interview, she added that Ryan had said mean things to her, taunting her while holding a gun, and that he was under the influence of drugs. Shauna maintained that she shot Ryan because she believed he was going to kick her out of his condo. She said she picked up the gun and shot him once, and then shot him several more times after seeing him twitch. During her confession, Shauna revealed that Ryan was vain and wanted a nose job, so she shot him in the face to grant his wish. During the intense questioning, Shauna revealed her worries about her schoolwork and how having a dead boyfriend would affect her future relationships. She was specifically concerned that no one would want to marry her once they found out she had killed her boyfriend in self-defense. The detective listened to her statement but ultimately arrested her and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shauna appeared genuinely surprised by her arrest, claiming she had acted in self-defense when she shot him. In 2015, Shauna's trial began, filling the courtroom with anticipation. The prosecutor started by comparing Shauna to Jodi Arias, who had also been accused of murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander. The similarities between the two cases added to the tension in the courtroom as everyone waited for the verdict. The prosecutor believed that Shauna was obsessed with her ex-boyfriend Ryan, and that he was all she could think about. Ryan's friends testified that he wanted to end their relationship and was avoiding Shauna's calls and messages. Despite this, Shauna would often show up uninvited at Ryan's condo in Highland Heights. On the night Ryan was murdered, the prosecution presented evidence that he had a date planned with Audrey Bolt, a former beauty queen. The prosecution suggested that Shauna was motivated by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's new love interest. Audrey Bolt testified that Ryan stood her up on the night of the murder. She had no idea he had been shot and killed until later. The prosecution presented evidence that Ryan had told his father he wanted to break up with Shauna, and his father advised him to be kind to her to avoid a messy breakup. However, Ryan and Shayna exchanged texts on the day of the murder, with Ryan telling her he didn't want to see her. Despite this, Shayna showed up at his condo uninvited. The prosecution believed that during an argument, Ryan told Shayna he was done with her and that she could no longer control him. This allegedly enraged Shayna, who then picked up a gun and shot Ryan. The prosecution played a video of Shayna's police interrogation, which they claimed showed her to be a cold-blooded murderer. In the video, Shayna appears carefree and unemotional, which the prosecution argued was inconsistent with someone who had just killed in self-defense. However, this interpretation was open to interpretation by the jury. The defense argued that Ryan was acting erratically and violently on the night of the murder due to drugs he was taking, including anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines. The autopsy results showed that these drugs were present in Ryan's system. The defense claimed that Shayna shot Ryan in self-defense. The evidence suggested that the substances he was using influenced his actions. To support this idea, Shayna's lawyers called an expert in toxicology to testify on her behalf. The expert stated that a combination of anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines could cause someone to become violent and paranoid. The defense presented this expert testimony to create a reasonable explanation for Shayna's actions, questioning whether she had intentionally meant to harm anyone. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution became worried that the jury might be swayed by Shayna's self-defense claim, particularly because she was smart, young, and attractive. These fears were alleviated on April 23rd when the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shayna of murdering her boyfriend Ryan Poston. However, at the sentencing hearing in August 2015, Shayna continued to blame Ryan for his own death, which outraged his friends and family. Shayna claimed she was innocent throughout the trial and refused to take responsibility for her actions, despite the evidence against her. In Kentucky, defendants who are victims of domestic violence may be eligible for reduced parole after serving just 20% of their sentence. However, the judge didn't believe Shayna qualified for this reduced parole, citing that her crime was a premeditated murder. As a result, Shayna was sentenced to 40 years in prison, making her eligible for parole in 17 years, at the age of 41 in 2032. After her sentencing, Shayna appealed for a new trial, which was granted in August 2016. The reason for the appeal was that one of the jurors had a felony conviction, which they had concealed. This violated Kentucky law, as felons are not allowed to serve on juries. In August 2018, Shayna's second trial for Ryan Poston's murder began, 4 months later than expected. Her defense attorney presented opening arguments, stating that during her year-and-a-half relationship with Ryan, Shayna tried her best to make him happy. However, their relationship suffered as a result. The defense attorney claimed that on the night Shayna met Ryan, he was violent toward her, both physically and sexually. This incident had a lasting impact on Shayna, causing her to take several weeks to respond to his messages afterwards. Additionally, the defense team argued that Shayna had a history of trauma stemming from a sexual assault she experienced in high school. This led to her struggles with alcohol abuse and promiscuity. They claimed that this traumatic experience contributed to her behavior on the night of Ryan's murder. The defense team's strategy was to present a sympathetic portrayal of Shayna, highlighting her troubled past and arguing that she was not responsible for her actions on the night of the murder. They aimed to challenge the prosecution's narrative and convince the jury that her behavior was driven by a combination of factors, including a history of abuse and a toxic relationship with Ryan. Shayna's defense team claimed that she was a victim of domestic violence by Ryan rather than a cold-blooded killer. They argued that her actions were a result of years of abuse not driven by revenge or financial gain. The defense pointed out that Ryan constantly belittled Shayna about her weight and breast size, making her feel insecure and inadequate. This, they said, contributed to her low self-esteem. The defense also stated that Shayna and Ryan's sexual relationship was troubled, marked by frequent arguments and frustration on both sides. They claimed that Ryan's desire for a more intimate connection was unfulfilled, leading to a growing rift between they. The defense presented evidence that Shayna had received a treatment to improve her romantic life. They claimed that she got this treatment to address sexual problems in their relationship and strengthen their bond. The defense argued that Ryan's consistent lack of interest and rejection made things worse, causing Shayna to become more and more frustrated and disconnected from him. The defense claimed that Ryan often broke up with Shayna, only to pursue relationships with other women. However, the prosecution clarified that they were not trying to portray Ryan as a perfect partner, but rather as someone who was not abusive. The prosecution argued that Shayna did not kill Ryan in self-defense, but rather because he had finally ended their toxic relationship on the night of the shooting. They believed Ryan had every reason to break up with Shayna, as she continued to harass him even after their previous breakups. Despite Ryan's efforts to end the relationship, Shayna consistently returned. The prosecution saw this as evidence of Shauna's inability to let go of the relationship. A friend of Ryan's testified that this breakup was different, as Ryan had never had the courage to end things with Shauna in person before, implying that this time the breakup would be permanent. Ryan accused Shauna of trying to hold on to him. To support this claim, the prosecution presented texts where Shauna told her friends that the romantic interactions with Ryan had brought them closer. However, Shauna testified in her own defense, contradicting Ryan's claim. She said that their romantic interactions had actually driven them apart. In a separate text exchange, Shauna asked Ryan for sex, but he declined due to the side effects of his antidepressant medication, which had reduced his libido. Despite these conflicting accounts, Shauna testified that Ryan had forcibly had sex with her. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury again found Shauna guilty of murdering Ryan. Despite the contradictory testimonies and evidence, the jury confirmed their original verdict, and during the sentencing hearing, Shauna's mother emotionally addressed the judge, sharing stories of her daughter's remarkable singing talent, which had earned her multiple college scholarships. Through tears, she asked the jury to consider granting Shauna parole, emphasizing that her daughter still had the potential to positively impact others' lives. Shauna's mother made it clear that her plea did not diminish the profound grief and pain experienced by the family of Ryan Poston. Despite her mother's emotional appeal, Shauna was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. According to the sentence, Shauna must serve at least 17 years before becoming eligible for parole in 2032. She is currently serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. On the quiet autumn night of October 31st, 1991, in Tyler, Texas, as the fall season settled in, the clock struck 2 a.m. The peaceful neighborhood of 29th Street was deep in slumber, except for a small framed house nestled at the corner. Unaware that it was about to become a scene of horror, 8-year-old Chad Choice lay in his bed, lost in dreams, when an intruder silently invaded the house, snatching him away into the darkness of the night. Initially deemed a runaway incident due to lack of evidence, the case transformed into a nightmare for investigators once the crucial 48-hour window passed without any sign of who might have had the means to silently infiltrate Chad's home, spiriting him away without a trace. But the pivotal question remains, would Chad ever reunite with his family and return home? This city, named after the 10th President of the United States, John Tyler, stands as the largest in northeastern Texas, often referred to as the Rose Capital or Rose City. Tyler earned its reputation due to its extensive history of rose production, cultivation, and processing. Each October, the city welcomes thousands of tourists. However, the October of 1991 took a dark turn as Chad Choice mysteriously vanished without a trace, casting a shadow over the usually vibrant atmosphere. Ernest Chadwick Choice, known affectionately as Chad Choice, came into the world on April 26, 1983 in Texas. He was one of the cherished 4 children in the Choice household, a beautiful soul deeply adored by his family, particularly his mother, Karen Elaine Choice. Chad was an outgoing youngster surrounded by a large circle of friends with whom he frequently played. Moreover, his strong bond and affectionate relationship with his siblings were apparent as they often enjoyed quality time together. Chad's energetic and lively nature were further evident in his regular visits to the playground. Chad had an older sister named Angela Choice who fondly recalls that her little brother had a passion for riding bikes, scaling trees, and indulging in sports. Details about the remaining siblings were not made public. As a student at Mamie G. Griffin Elementary School, Chad's life was in its budding stage. At just 8 years old, he had his entire future ahead of him. However, fate often takes unforeseen turns, and tragically, Chad's destiny had already been sealed. The daily routine of the Choice family was shattered on the morning of October 31st, 1991. Chad's mother, Karen, rose early and went to the church without waking her children, allowing them to continue sleeping. However, just a few minutes into her church service, Karen received a phone call. It was my daughter, and she asked me if Chad was with me, and I said no, I left him at home. And she said, well, we've looked everywhere and we can't find him. Karen rushed back home and began scouring the neighborhood for Chad. She sought assistance from her neighbors as well. Despite their collective efforts and their thorough search, Chad seemed to have vanished without a trace. It was as though he had disappeared into thin air. Now it was the police's turn to investigate the matter. During his initial inspection, he looked for signs of a break-in, but there were no indications of forced entry. Moreover, there were no signs of struggle inside the house. Based on the initial investigation, he began to consider the possibility that Chad might have run away from home. However, Karen firmly believed that her son had been kidnapped, and as the sun set and the day turned into a chilly night, the tension escalated into fear. Adding to her fear, the crucial 48-hour window had passed without any signs of him. During the interview, Chad's older sister Angela Choice provided a crucial piece of information to the detective. Her house keys had disappeared the day before, and she distinctly recalled leaving them by the back door of their residence. This revelation raised additional questions, suggesting the possibility of a planned kidnapping or something even more disturbing. 2 days after Chad's disappearance, a ransom note was discovered at the business of Chad's uncle, Greg Sterling, prompting the investigation to swiftly shift focus to a kidnapping scenario. As the family attempted to deliver the money at the Greyhound bus station as instructed, the kidnapper failed to appear. Several days later, Chad's mother received an anonymous phone call revealing that Chad's disappearance was linked to a family member's drug debt with a man named Paco. Investigators discovered that Greg Sterling owed money to 3 Colombian drug dealers in the area, Paco Jr. and Carlos, shedding light on a possible motive of Chad's abduction. However, the case still remained elusive. On the 1-year anniversary of Chad's disappearance, his mother, Karen Choice, discovered a note fluttering on her car windshield. The note asserted that Chad was still alive and demanded $6,000 for his safe return. This development reignited the investigation, filling the Choice family with hope and prayers of seeing Chad again. However, the case suffered a setback when the kidnapper failed to make contact once more, causing the investigation to stall again. Time was not on their side. Slowly, years were passing by, and Chad Choice's disappearance gradually evolved into a cold case. 4 years later, in October 1995, a grocery sack appeared on the Choice family's doorstep. Initially, it seemed like a regular grocery sack. However, upon opening it, it revealed something that would haunt Karen Choice for the rest of her life. Inside the package was a human skull. The skull was subsequently sent to the FBI for analysis. DNA samples from Choice's family were collected to compare with the skull's DNA to confirm its identity as Chad's. Despite these efforts, the results remained inconclusive. Later, the skull was sent to a university in Texas for further examination involving the expertise of forensic anthropology. The results came back, and unfortunately, Karen's worst fears were confirmed when forensic analysis revealed that the skull indeed belonged to Chad. Investigators grappled with the ruthless nature of a person who not only commits a crime but continues to torment the victim's family for years. Despite the struggle to comprehend this, Karen all along had an unshakable feeling in her heart that she would never see Chad alive again. All she could do now was pray for justice. While Chad Choice's case grew increasingly difficult to solve, another narrative unfolded in Smith County Jail in early 1996. A man named Patrick Horn was slated to be sentenced in federal court for credit union robberies and carjacking charges. He was also charged with the murder of James Levisser, a fruit stand owner. It became evident that Horn was destined to spend the rest of his life behind bars or even face a potential death sentence. However, this man would soon become the center of Chad's murder case. It occurred when he mentioned Chad's Choice's named to the police during his time behind bars. While this might have been part of a deal to reduce his prison sentence, to the investigators, it marked the first significant breakthrough they had made in the case so far. Was a resident in the Choice family's neighborhood and was friends with them. During his interview regarding Chad's case, Horn informed investigators that he knew the identity of Chad's killer. As per Horn's account, Chad was murdered by 2 local drug dealers, both Colombian nationals who were known by the street names Paco and Carlos. But the case was just about to get more twisted. After Horn made the statement, he received a package in his jail cell containing a small boy's leg bone, later confirmed through analysis to be Chad's. Horn asserted to the police that Paco and Carlos had sent the package. However, detectives couldn't shake the feeling that Horn was hiding something significant about the entire story. Despite repeated questioning by the detectives, Horn consistently maintained that he had no additional information apart from Paco and Carlos being the culprits. However, on May 31st, 1996, Horn finally disclosed something more. He tells us, he says, basically, I'm a victim in this crime as well. All I did was help bury the child. I didn't have any other involvement in it. And now they're threatening me because of my knowledge of what they did. And Horn then revealed the precise location where Chad was buried. Shortly afterward, he was escorted by the police to 401 Summerside in Tyler, which was Horn's own backyard. At 4 p.m. that same day, The detectives began digging and discovered Chad's skeletal remains along with 38 caliber shell casings. This moment marked a sudden turn in the investigation, with all suspicions now pointed directly at Patrick Horn. Without delay, in June 1996, the investigators hurried to Athens, a city in Texas. In a jail cell there, a man sat who was anticipated to be a crucial piece of the puzzle, important in solving the case once and for all. This man was none other than Patrick Horn's brother, Keaton Horn, who was facing charges of probation violation. The detective's suspicions were completely on point this time. With Keaton's statement, this case solidified into concrete evidence that Horn was indeed responsible for this notorious crime. Keaton admitted to digging up the bones or the lake bone and mailing it to Pat in jail and at Horn's direction, preparing the note to make it look like a threat from Paco and Carlos. An investigator explained, Horn's scheme to mislead investigators had ultimately unraveled. The solution to a seemingly unsolvable case was finally in hand. However, one question still lingered. Why did Horn kill Chad? On September 24, 1999, 8 years after Chad Choice's murder, the jury found Horn guilty in the Smith County Courthouse and sentenced him to death. However, even at the end of his chapter, Horn wouldn't cease tormenting the Choice household. Horn adamantly refused to sign the waiver allowing Chad's remains to be released to his family for a proper burial. Legally, he was required to agree to the release since the remains were evidence in his case. However, he insisted on retaining control over the fate of the 8-year-old Chad's remains. Horn did initially sign a waiver indicating his agreement to the release of Chad's Choice's remains. However, the document was somehow lost between his attorney's office and the judge's office. At first deemed a mere formality, District Judge Diane DeVasto announced in a December 1999 hearing that she would order the release of 30 exhibits, including Chad's skull and other bones to his family for burial, contingent upon Horn signing another waiver. Horn's appellate lawyer, Tommy Wilkinson of Greenville, sent the document to Horn via Federal Express, anticipating its return with the signature within a day. However, a month passed without any response from Horn. He did not reply to several letters from his attorney and ignored messages sent to him through officials at the Atlanta Federal Prison. Assistant District Attorney Ed Marty stated that if the remains were granted without the waiver, they might have to be exhumed sometime in the future. It remains uncertain when Horn eventually signed the waiver and if he did, when he signed it. Furthermore, Horn was 17 years old when he committed the murder of Chad. According to a ruling by the United States Supreme Court, anyone under the age of 18 cannot be executed. As a result, his sentence was commuted to life in prison. While this might not have been the exact form of justice Karen Choice desired, she could finally find solace in knowing that Patrick Horn would never walk free.